On today's Toy Spot, why we're having a look at the DC Collectibles Justice League, the New 52 Superman. Yes, it has frozen over if you are asking yourself, well, why is Spot picking up and reviewing a figure based on the Superman costume which he has clearly indicated in the past he has not liked? I don't know. I know, even my cat is asking. I really don't know. I don't know. I'll feed you later. In the meantime, I don't even know. I don't even know. No, Superman costume, I totally agree. I initially didn't like it. I picked up, as we know, Spot picked up the Mattel DC Comics Unlimited Superman, which was the metallic repaint. Then Spot picked up the All-Stars version. I don't know what it is. Lately, Spot has been on a fix for this costume. Not really sure why. This is where the story wraps up with this review. The packaging is a standard white box indicating the DC Comics logo up at the top corner there. On the side, picture of Superman. So this is sculpted by Jack Matthews. That's actually a pretty good sculpt on the figure. I'm surprised. I don't know what's going on. And on the back, comic superstars Jeff Jones and Jim Lee make history with when enemies from a distant galaxy threaten his adopted planet. Superman joins forces with the world's greatest heroes. You can collect them all, and Spot's already done a review of the Wonder Woman, the Justice League Cyborg, which I've not reviewed, and then the remaining members down below of Aquaman, Green Lantern, which I've reviewed, Batman I've reviewed, Flash, of course, Cyborg on the end again. For product info and more, you can go to dccomics.com, Comic Shop Locator service. You can also go to comicshoplocator.com. What Spot is going to do is take a bit of a break. I'm going to get this opened up, and when we come back, we are going to get a better look at the Justice League New 52 Superman. Don't go anywhere. Stay tuned. As with all the other DC collectibles, Superman unfortunately does not come with a display stand. There's nothing, I wouldn't say there's any real problem with the figure standing. He seems to stand pretty good as he is. He's not back heavy or anything like that. As for the figure, I just put my hand up to my face and I just kind of shake my head. For all the ripping I did of the costume itself, I gotta say, even though maybe Spot is a traditional old school collector of Superman and I love the old design of Superman, figure-wise, the new costume I think seems to work really well when translated in a figure form. I don't know, maybe it's just me. As a comparison, I'm going to put him aside. I'm going to reach off camera here and I'm going to bring in the DC Comics Unlimited Superman. Obviously this would be from Mattel. This is with the DC Universe style, the DC Direct. Mild difference between the two. For the most part, the design is still roughly the same. You'll notice that the Superman S on the DC Collectibles is a lot larger. Cape is a little more relaxed. Some creative changes were made, I think, for the initial figure. The belt is roughly about the same. The boots are roughly the same as well. As for the faces, we'll zoom in. We really shouldn't be comparing DC Direct to Mattel, but there is the difference between the two. DC Comics more so a comic simplified stylistic design, whereas you've got the DC Collectibles that go more so for a full-blown comic design. Full-blown comic design, I say to my cat. But I don't know what it is. Spot seems to be really warming up to this costume, and I don't know what is wrong with me. I think as a figure, this Superman is done really well. Really, really well. Now, I've heard there has been some issues with this figure with joints, specifically the arm joint. I could see where that problem comes into play. I can't seem to move my arms out very much at all on this figure, and I'm likely gonna just leave it as is. Perhaps the main culprit for the figure is the fact that his upper chest area here, you can see where that it would butt up against that arm. So pulling it out and moving it, I can see where it's causing almost a bit of an obstruction, an obstacle for that limb to come out. As for the face, I think the face is really neat. It's really done well. Now, it's not to say just because I like the face and I like this figure, I'm still not a purist. I would say I still love the original Superman costume, but I'm warming up. I think more and more I'm warming up to the new costume. I don't even know why I'm saying that. I'm so sorry. Young Spot at 6 years old who had Superman collectibles, who loved the costume. I'm so sorry for saying that. But I do like the costume. I think, again, the only thing I could really nitpick as a gripe, I still don't like the panel lining. I really don't like the panel lining. If that was just a straight up Superman costume where this was just solid blue, I think I would like it a lot more. There's aspects to this figure's costume, Superman's costume, that don't actually bother me the more and more I'm seeing of it. I really like the pointed sleeves. That might be a small thing, and perhaps as Spot gets older and more accepting of things, even the missing underoos is starting to not bother me as much. I really like the Superman shield that they've given this figure. It's nice and broad. Again, it doesn't really need the panel lines. That's still something that I'm holding very true to. But the face, I think, is done really, really well. It's not quite the Superman S anymore. It's kind of a bit of a combed over style. Unfortunately, this one Superman has an imperfection right there. I don't think that's on the actual character of Superman. I don't remember him having any sort of flesh-eating disease, but this Superman unfortunately has an imperfection, at least on the side face there. But aside from that, face-wise, it's done really well. It's a much younger interpretation of Superman. A little more brash. The cape is a nice dark color. You know what? I'm going to say one thing about this, the figures as a whole for the new Superman costume. The choice of colors, I think, work exceptionally well. I didn't really think a dark red mixed with this kind of, I'm not even sure what kind of blue you can call this, but between the two, they surprisingly work really well together. Superman all the way down to his boots. His boots have survived, although a little more armored up than your traditional Superman. Gone are the quasi-Superman M-shaped boots. Instead, we kind of got a more pointed boot. I'm not really a fan of all the detail in here. I mean, it's nice in a figure. Costume-wise, that could have easily been just a straight-up boot. But the panel lining, I think, still is not something I'm a big fan of. But this figure does things really, really well. It's a good quality figure. Now, I don't say good quality in the sense that, you know, it probably has good joints. Be careful, again, like I've heard where arms and stuff start coming off on this figure. But on a sculpt and overall execution, I think this figure works really well. And again, there's his face with his Superman blue eyes. At least they didn't change his eyes. They put him on a much younger Superman face, but nonetheless. The high collar is also something that doesn't seem to be bothering me as much. Who knows, maybe one day we will get the Superman back in his classic comic attire. The one thing I noticed about the Superman cape is that the S seems much larger. I'm going to bring in the DC All-Star, the DC Universe All-Star Superman. You can see the S is much smaller. Much smaller. I think this one, the cape, I love much more on the DC Collectibles versus the DC Comics Unlimited version. I like how the cape slopes down. You can see the sculpt where it's just kind of folded. It's got all these little folds and creases to it. But yeah, initially I ripped this figure apart. I said to myself, Spot, you're never going to buy this figure. You're never going to pick it up. You're not going to jump on this bandwagon of revamping comic costumes. You're not going to be part of the system. But instead, look what Spot's done. He's ended up picking up the figure, and actually, I'm very happy that I did. I am very happy that I did. In the way of his articulation, the DC Collectibles New 52 Superman has, I would like to say, a ball joint. If it is, unfortunately, Superman cannot move his head up. He can move it down. Not sure why you need it all the way down like that, but it always seems to be a problem that the sculpt of a hair seems to prevent any sort of movement up on a figure. His arms, I'm going to assume, go out, but unfortunately, I'm having a tough time getting them to move. It looks like an indication that they would likely move out. Spot's just going to leave it alone, though. Spot doesn't want to ruin a figure. The arms do move back and forth, though. There is a rotation in the bicep, a bend at the elbow. There is no articulation in the wrist, likely due to the sculpt of the sleeve. No waist swivel, again, due to sculpt. Legs go forward, back, bend at the knee, and that's it. He is a little limited by his articulation. I would say in a case like this, for a sculpt and overall work put into the figure, I'm not too bothered by the fact that it doesn't have a lot of articulation to it. Spot just, again, can't believe he ultimately went back and picked up this figure. Now, if you were to pick up the We Can Be Heroes set, the Superman there is slightly different, slightly retooled in the head. Now, I did not pick up the We Can Be Heroes set. It only stemmed from the fact that I had already picked up most of the new 52 figures anyways. I think the only one I'm missing is Aquaman, Cyborg, and Flash, which ultimately I could go back and pick up again later. But having seen the images and the reviews of the We Can Be Heroes set, I think on a sculpt level, this Superman, I think, is much better face-wise and overall, you know, the sculpt on hair and everything else versus that figure. So I'm kind of glad. I know it was for a good cause. I'm kind of glad at least I picked up the single-carded version of this figure. I'm happy with how he turned out, even though he's got a little bit of a imperfection on the side of his face. But still, I'm very surprised I like this figure as much as I did. Paint's good, sculpt is solid. If you can find him, and you, like myself, maybe are warming a little more up, just a little bit, guys. Don't jump on, beat up Spot about it. But I am getting a little more used to the figure and a little more used to the costume. And I actually really like this figure. I'm going to give this figure a 9. And I would say if you like it yourself and you can still find it in stores, pick it up. Today's Toy Spot, we're having a look at the DC Collectibles Justice League New 52 Superman. A really surprisingly good figure. Thanks for watching, guys. See you next time. Bye.